We're now joined by our children's advocate, Diane Gordon Harrison, and she's going to shed light on the proposed amendment to the Sexual Offences Act, specifically as it relates to the decriminalization of sexual offences involving minors, and that in itself, people, it leads to misinterpretation. Good morning, Diane Gordon Harrison. Thank you for speaking with us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
So let me start there. What is the proposed amendment?
All right, so thank you so much for the opportunity, because it has created quite a bit of waves.
Yes.
I'm so grateful for the opportunity to clarify. So essentially what we're saying is that sexual offenses are extremely serious, and we want to preserve our resources for the most serious and heinous of those categories of cases. So when we're talking about sex between minors, it does not include where minors force their counterparts into sexual situations. It does not include, for example, a gang rape. It doesn't include a battery where boys just feel like, all right, it's time now, we're going to earn our spurs. It doesn't include any of those situations. What we're talking about, however, is where you have two young people who think they're in love. So you have an 11th grader or two 11th graders. They both happen to be below 16, or you have a 17 and a 15, and they have been dating for a while. And then one thing leads to the other in the heat of the moment, and hormones get out of control. So we're saying in those circumstances, it really is a sexual and reproductive health conversation that needs to be had with those children. And so, yes, there are to be consequences, but our view is that when you place those children before the court, you have more disruption than you have good. For instance, it is usually the boy who is criminalized and placed before the court. So his education is interrupted with the frequent visits to the court. It is a girl who is in love with her boyfriend and is now traumatized because she's being forced, as it were. And these are the cases we're talking about, where somebody finds out and the girl is forced to make a report. She doesn't want to, and she goes through all kinds of emotional and psychological issues because of it, and the boy is interrupted. What we have in the natural progression of those cases is that they actually do not get resolved in a way that the public thinks. The boy is not, in fact, sent to prison in many instances because the girl actually does not eventually end up giving evidence against her boyfriend. So we're saying, let us have some very strict and firm conditions that would have to be achieved if it is that these youngsters are to benefit from this, what we call close in age exception. So
Close in age.
Yes, that's what we're saying. So it can't be a 15 and a 25 or a 17 and a 12.
We are 13 and a 14?
Well, we haven't defined what it should be, and we think that's something that requires consultation along with our Ministry of Health counterparts who focus on sexual and reproductive health and hormonal changes and so on. So we're not being prescriptive in the age, but what we're saying is that if they are girlfriend and boyfriend, they're in an exclusive relationship, they're having their little, puppy love thing, and something happens within that context. So there's no force, there's no fraud, there's no coercion, there's no manipulation, there is in fact no aggravating circumstances present. Let us talk to them about the beauty of delaying sexual activity, about abstinence, about self-control, about focusing on your books and getting where you need to get in life, instead of saying, put it before the court and there's no meaningful resolution. So we're looking at the root of the problem.
No, that 17 and 15 could end up in the courts.
Yes.
Usually, is that that's the parents, right?
Sometimes, yes. Oftentimes it's the parents. And, sometimes it's so unfair when we see how these cases actually come about, because, believe it or not, we have some very aggressive girls who actually pursue the boys. And what is happening, it is the boy who appears in the criminal dock as the criminal, when sometimes it is the girl who literally strips herself, taunts the boy, fondles herself, gets him aroused, and then one thing leads to the other. And they're all happily going about their business until somebody finds out. And so we think that in keeping with fairness, it's something that we need to look at very differently. in keeping with being effective and looking at solutions and not just a knee-jerk reaction, we need to do things differently. And also in keeping with the general principles of juvenile justice that Jamaica has ascribed to both locally and in accordance with international treaties, we need to rescue portions of the juvenile population where we can and save our energy and resources for sexual predators and for those youngsters who are having sex with minors, but in an aggressive way and through coercion.
Yeah, I think for me the challenge, Diane, is using the court system to, for want of a better word, parent
Absolutely.
the children.
Absolutely.
I feel, and so I think they're placing the onus on you and your statement to say, oh, but we're going to allow the children are not going to get out of hand because they're not going to feel like there's going to be accountability for their actions. But then who does that fall on?
Right.
Because I feel unless we identify someone or some kind of system, it's always going to be coming back to your
Right,
statement.
which is fine, but our position is that the court is not a parent.
Right.
The court was not established to parent, and it doesn't have the resources. It doesn't have little mothers and fathers running around to deal with root causes of certain issues. The court is there for a purpose, and it serves that purpose well, and it should be confined to that purpose. So we stand by our position that we need to have effective and responsible parenting that has appropriate discussions with children through various stages of their development. And as I said, they stress the importance of responsible choices, how to navigate sexual decisions, the beauty and the importance of delaying sexual encounters. And of course, when you look at helping your children to navigate the urges. I mean, you will all have urges, but we're not animals. So that higher thinking power and will must step in.
Who we benchmarking
Right?
against, Diane?
In terms of other jurisdictions
Yes.
that have gone this
Yes.
route. So we've looked at Canada, and
Right.
Canada has a very well articulated close in age exception formula that they have actually incorporated in their legislation. And Turkey as well has gone that particular route. But the conditions are firm. It can't just be, oh, I'm 15 and she's 17, so we're close in age.
Right.
No, it has to be, as I said, an exclusive relationship, no force, no aggravating circumstances, no exploitative or abusive kind of components for them to qualify. And then, of course, it involves discussion with the parents as well, because these are minors, so the parental role and views are very important in this kind of discussion. And we look to see if the case warrants this approach, and then if it does, it doesn't say, okay, goodbye. It routes them along another path that will teach them the whole relationship between cause and action, consequences for your decisions, and tries to push responsible behavior and attitudes towards sexual engagement.
Organizations like Hear the Children's Cry are advocating for stricter measures, and they've given examples, shorter incarceration or sanctions over full decriminalization. What is your response to that? Would mandatory counseling, for example, be a better option?
Right. I so believe that mandatory counseling is more in sync with my proposal, which is responsible sexual and reproductive health. So you're having a public health response and a social guidance response as opposed to a punitive response.
Right.
And I think certainly the position that has been articulated by Hear the Children's Cry is extremely out of sync with the objectives of juvenile justice, which speak about using imprisonment or deprivation of liberty as an absolute last resort and for the most heinous of offenses. And for me, if you have two little youngsters who are completely misguided and playing doctor in the bathroom and they get caught, I don't see how that would be the worst of cases that we're recommending incarceration. So I think it demonstrates a lack of understanding of the principles that we have ascribed to, and also the conventions that we are party to, and the optional protocols, which say a completely different outcome is to be pursued.
You said you were glad for the opportunity because you wanted to clarify. Clearly, there's been a lot of pushback in the public. I've heard one group or folks say, this is going to be interpreted as you giving children carte blanche to go off and do, what they want to do. How do you respond to the general hefty, heavy pushback on the position?
Well, I see it as a hefty misunderstanding, which perhaps has caused that pushback. But from where I sit, I'm into effective solutions, irrespective of the noise that comes with those proposals. And so in this instance, when we look at and just do an analysis of the cases that have come before the court in this kind of category, two puppy lovers doing their thing,
it's 363 over 1,034.
Right.
A lot of time taken up.
Yes, it's a lot of time in terms of the resources of the state for cases that ultimately do not go anywhere. Because when you get to the stage of that girl who is to go into the witness box and give testimony against her boyfriend, it's not happening. So what we have is an inconclusive outcome if you go the traditional court system. And we still have an absence of that discussion that needs to take place with those youngsters to ensure that they don't leave court. And then next year, guess what? They've done the same thing again. So how do we deal with correcting the root actions that propel the behavior?
So where do we go from here, Diane? Having made a proposal now, so we're not firm on age yet. So there's obviously some more build out and some more meat that needs to be put on the framework. What happens now?
All right, so we're going in a circle because these proposals were made from as far back as 2014 to the Joint Select Committee of Parliament that was then considering amendments to the Sexual Offences Act and again renewed, I think, in 2021. So this is not new, but clearly what usually would happen in jurisdictions that are going this route is there's a period of public consultation. As I said, it heavily will involve persons who are versed in sexual and reproductive health to look at what are our benchmarks, what are we seeing in terms of youngsters who are engaging in these kinds of sexual connections, and then we build out from there if we're going to go in this particular direction.
Okay.
God go with you, because this one is going to be a tough climb. Tough climb, but I hear what you're saying. Hear what you're saying. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
This morning, Children's Advocate, Jamaica's Children's Advocate, Diane Gordon Harrison.
After the break, we'll be speaking with a woman dominating the maritime industry.